as complete now, or are there steps you might take to try to ensure, as the chairman suggested, a more fair trial in the Senate?
You mean more fair trial than they're contemplating? Because we had a very fair process in the House of Representatives. I would yield to our let me just put it another way. We have legislation approved by the Rules Committee that will enable us to decide how we will send over the articles of impeachment. We cannot name managers until we see what the process is on the Senate side, and I would hope that that will be soon, as we did with our legislation, our Resolution 660, to describe what the process would be. So far, we haven't seen anything that looks fair to us, so hopefully it will be fairer, and when we see what that is, we'll send our managers.
What is a fair trial? What would you consider a fair trial?
Wait to send the articles until you understand what the Senate's going to do?
We'll make a decision as a group, as we always have, as we go along.
So you can presumably withhold the articles? You can presumably withhold the articles for weeks until you get what you consider a fair trial?
Well, again, we'll decide what that dynamic is, but we hope that the resolution of that process will be soon in the Senate. Cheryl, did you have one, Cheryl? Did you have a question, Cheryl? Yeah.
I do have a question. What do you consider a fair trial? What are you looking for?
Could you give me a screenshot then? Well, let me tell you what I don't consider. What I don't consider a fair trial. This is what I don't consider a fair trial. That Leader McConnell has stated that he's not an impartial juror, that he's going to take his cues, in quotes, from the White House, and he is working in total coordination with the White House counsel's office. Any comments, my colleagues, on that?
Well, let me just say that obviously Senator McConnell, by that declaration, has said that he is so, as in effect, the foreman of the jury is working with the defendant's counsel. That's not fair. And we'll have to see what else, but that's certainly an indication of an intention to have an unfair trial.
We'd like to see a trial look, it's up to the senators to make their own decision, working together, hopefully in recognition of their witnesses that the president withheld from us, their documents that the president withheld from us, and we would hope that that information would be available in a trial to go to the next step, because that's another level in terms of conviction in terms of this. But right now, the president is impeached.
Will you definitely complete Speaker Nancy? You never send the articles? Is it possible you never send the articles?
We're not having that discussion. We have done what we have set out to do. The House has acted on a very sad day to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, to do so in a manner that was fair, even though the other side was mischaracterizing it. Nonetheless, it was fair and appropriate and urgent. So we will make our decision as to when we're going to send it when we see what they're doing on the Senate side, but that's a decision that we will make jointly. Okay, you're starting to act like another country. Don't shout, okay? Who's not going to shout a question?
Speaker,
yes, sir.
Guarantee that the impeachment articles will be at some point sent to the Senate.
I'm not
guarantee that.
That would have been our intention, but we'll see what happens over there.
So you may not send
That is not. You're asking me, are we all going to go out and play in the snow? That has not been part of our conversation. That has not been part of our conversation. Excuse me, what? I'm sorry, dear.
We need verification since you have raised the prospect of not sending the articles over.
No, I've never raised the prospect. You asked the question. I never raised the prospect. I said we're not sending it tonight because it's difficult to determine who the managers would be until we see the arena in which we will be participating. That's all I said. I never raised the prospect.
Any timetable?
Well, we'll see what when they come forward. It's up to the Senate to say what their rules will be. My colleagues, do you want to say anything about this? Because it is, this is a serious matter. Even though the majority leader in the United States Senate says it's okay for the foreman of the jury to be in cahoots with the lawyers of the accused. That doesn't sound right to us. But let's see when they understand what we have acted. Now they'll understand what their responsibilities are, and we'll see what that is. But I never raised that possibility. No.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.